I'm sorry, you all. That intro for chapter 7, I made a mistake and pushed the wrong button because I was trying to show you all the moon. That's the moon right there. It's a full moon. Wow. Okay, I'm gonna have to find a way to connect. You know what? It's just gonna be part 1 and part 2. It is what it is. It's just gonna be part 1 and part 2 of chapter 7. But I made a mistake and pushed the wrong button, and it ended that video. But we're back on. We're back on. I'm just looking for a spot and some light to set up. You know, that's Lidl's right there. I think right here will be good. It's a nice little spot. You know, sometimes when I'm doing these videos, we got people and animals and all kinds of stuff going on as I'm trying to do the video. Okay, so the other thing is that's the highway behind us, so we might hear some cars. If it becomes too much of a distraction, I'll just move somewhere else. So Sharon quit her job at the grocery store and began her cake business, which eventually turned into an actual food business. But we'll get into that in some other chapters. But as the business was starting to take shape, it was early 2020. And there was a virus going around. And people were encouraged to stay at home. Now, during this time, I lived in a rooming house. That was my home on the campus of Hampton University. And once me and Sharon developed our relationship, I pretty much started staying with her. So every night she would come over to the campus and she would sell her cakes and, you know, all of that. And we would, you know, but once we were done with the business of the day, I would go to her house. And here's the thing. It felt like family. It felt like family. I didn't feel like a single man, you know, with no real purpose. You know, that was, you know what, these cars, I think I'm gonna have to move because this is kind of a deep chapter, and I kind of want to make these points with no interruptions. The thing was, I felt like this was an opportunity for me to feel like I was back in a family. From the standpoint of, I'm in a household with a woman and a child. You know? Although I always told myself that I would not get involved with a single mother. Yeah, I told myself I would not get involved with a single mother. I had never done it before, so this was my first time getting involved with a single mother. And the thing is, You know how you say there are things that you're not going to do, but you just kind of think why you shouldn't do it. But then when you get in the actual situation, if you find yourself in that situation, you know why you shouldn't do it. We're going to get into that in this story. Because when they came down with the stay-at-home order, I chose Sharon's house, as my place to stay at home. Okay? And she felt it was a good idea too. Once again, me being a single man living in a rooming house on an empty college campus was frightening, but that was my home. I mean, I had a lease, I was paying on it, I paid monthly rent to live there, the whole 9 yards. So I did have a place of my own, but during the pandemic and the stay-at-home order, I chose to stay with Sharon and her daughter. Okay? It was a scary time period, y'all. Y'all remember what it was like. It was a scary time period. Nobody knew what was going on. We had never experienced anything like this. Was it the end of the world? Were we about to fall into martial law? Like, nobody knew. Okay? And for me, I felt the stress of, okay, I'm the man. I'm the man in this household situation. How am I going to protect and provide for this woman and this child during this situation? That was the stress that I put myself under. So, with the college campus being closed down, that was my main source of business. I still operated my eBay business, as best as I could. And, I still had hair clients, guys that would still come and get their hair cut, but the full-blown business was done. It was over until the college campus opened back up, or until the pandemic was over. So I began to listen to my favorite news source, which is public radio, NPR, National Public Radio, to try to get an idea of what was going on. I didn't want to watch any of the or listen to any of the other news networks, CNN, Fox, any of that stuff. I wanted to get my news from National Public Radio, because I always felt that it was the best source of news, because they don't have commercials and all of that kind of stuff. They do have sponsors, but y'all hear what I'm saying. And I heard that essential workers, which were people that worked in hospitals, people that worked in grocery stores, stuff like that, essential workers were able to come out and work. So I sat and thought, okay, being that I'm not cutting hair, being that I'm not operating my barbershop in my home, I'm living with Sharon in her home, can go get me a job at a grocery store. I can go get me a job at a grocery store because I had experience working in a grocery store. Yeah, I worked about a year and a half at a fresh market. You all might remember I did a video when we came back from one of our trips, and we went to the fresh market to get some coffee. Yeah, I worked in that store for a year and a half. So I had experience working in a grocery store, and I had experience working in a produce section. There was a grocery store about a 30-minute bike ride from where Sharon lived. And at the time, I had my transportation was a bike. I hope y'all can hear me. We got a little bit of a wind gust. My transportation was a bike. Now Sharon had an SUV. She had a Chevy Equinox or something like that. But I figured if I could ride my bike to this grocery store, I could start earning money to help with the household. Okay, y'all feel me? Y'all with me? So one morning I got up and I rode to the grocery store on my bike, just really to see how far it was. And it was about a half an hour bike ride. I went in, I inquired about a job, and I filled out an application. Okay? I filled out an application. I came back home and I told Sharon, I said, hey, it was a Harris Teeter. I don't know if y'all familiar with Harris Teeter, Kroger's. They kind of like the same grocery store. I came home and I told Sharon, I said, hey, I went to the Harris Teeter and I put in an application. What they're doing is people who work in grocery stores, they consider them essential workers, and, they're paying extra money for people who are essential workers. So I went and I put in an application, and I figured maybe I could work the morning shift, and in the afternoons I could still take care of some of my hair clients or whatever. I was trying to do what I could do to contribute to the situation. Okay, I had to sit and wait for them to, do my application and all of that. And I think this might have been a Wednesday. This might have been a Wednesday or a Thursday. Sharon just so happened to go to that grocery store. And once again, at this time, she had quit her job at the grocery store she was working at. She just so happened to go to that grocery store and see a manager that she used to work with in the store that she used to work at. And she talked to this particular guy, this manager, asked if they needed somebody to work in the bakery. He said, yeah. And she got the job on the spot. She got the job on the spot. She came back home and told me I got a job at Harris Teeter. I was like, I had already put in an application at Harris Teeter. And she proceeded to tell me what had happened, that she had, you know, seen one of her managers, and he hired her on the spot to work in their bakery. Okay, so what am I supposed to do? Her daughter was out of school. Because school was out. What am I supposed to do? I became the babysitter. Her daughter was maybe 8 years old at the time. Yeah, that's what happened. That's what happened. I would get up in the morning and do my regular morning routine, get up, make coffee and everything like that, and kind of straighten up. And at this point, she was getting herself ready for work. I would drop her off at work, and me and her daughter would come back to her house. That's what happened. Okay? And for like the first week, we would come back, and she would work the morning shift. She would get off around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. She'd go in at 9, get off at 2. For the first week, me and her daughter would come back, and I would go in the den area where I had set up my eBay business. No, I take that back. I didn't have a computer at the time. But what I would do is, take pictures of the clothes that I was selling, the whole 9 yards. I was just trying to keep myself busy doing anything that I could. I had a lot of clothing inventory. So I would work that. I would iron the clothes and take pictures and stuff like that. We did that for the first week. The second week, I said, okay, you're not going to be sitting up just watching TV all morning. And I took it upon myself, and just like I did with my children when they were young, on spring break or summer break, I would try to come up with activities that would keep their mind engaged, whether it was through creativity, drawing or painting or coloring, or also in academic stuff, your times tables, anything that I could do for my children to keep their minds going while they were on spring break or summer break. I applied it to Ashley, which was Sharon's daughter. Okay, so we would come in, and I say, we're going to learn our multiplication tables. We're going to read some books. We're going to create stories. We did all kinds of stuff until it was time for me to go pick up Sharon from work and bring her back home. The problem is, she would come home from work around 2 o'clock, have something to eat, and go to sleep. So in the afternoons, I'm I'm kind of still stuck entertaining her child. And I felt horrible. I didn't expect this. But this was one of the results of the pandemic on our young relationship, our relationship just starting. And it gets worse. On that note, this was chapter 7. Once again, this is part 2 because part 1 got interrupted because I was trying to get, now the moon is behind some clouds now. I was trying to get that full moon and made a mistake and pushed the wrong button. But chapter 8 of how me and SAYNIA became a couple is coming up. I know y'all are thinking, okay, wow, you got a long way to go. And we do. We got a long way to go. But this is the full story so you can understand everything that happened and the nuances of our relationship. So stay tuned for that. Thank you all for watching. Have a great evening. Be blessed and be a blessing.